Diversity, as I speak to many of our clients about, is about having a workplace that represents what society looks like and what an Australian society looks like. So it's about having a workplace that deals with, that has a number of different races and cultures and genders and ages and professions, and reflecting society within your own workplace. So that really is what diversity is. It's about having that workplace that covers the full scope of what's available from a workforce perspective. Inclusion, there's no point having diversity if at the end of the day you have a diverse workforce and members of that workforce don't feel included. And by inclusion we mean things that they feel respected, that they feel that the organisation's got a commitment to them, that they feel that they can raise issues, the issues will be dealt with by management. So it's the mix of both. So you can't just have diversity and think it's going to be successful if you also don't have inclusion as well. Oh, look, it's an area that we're still improving, without a doubt. I think Mapien, we're members of the Diversity Council, so we look at getting a lot of information from them about what's happening in industry, what's important to workforces and individual employees. It's becoming very clear that we're improving, but we've still got a way to go. The issue around diversity, inclusion is really important to workers, and a recent survey that the Diversity Council did, 3 out of 4 employees in Australia that were involved in the survey said that they fully supported their organisation having diversity and inclusion strategies in place. So it's very important for workers. And they want to see companies doing that. I think that we're definitely seeing more of a focus on it. Obviously we've seen a big focus on women in the workforce, women on boards, women in management positions. We're seeing more of a focus on Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders, more of a focus in the disability areas. So it's an area where in some sectors it can be easier to achieve. Sectors like banking and retail and things like that. In other sectors, we've probably still got a way to go. But from an industry perspective, in mining, oil and gas, construction, there's programs in place to try and get improvements, and we'll just have to monitor that and see how it goes. Look, I think if we were to talk to people walking down the street, we'd all recognise that there are areas that need improvement. And I think the Diversity Council's report in 2019 highlighted some of those areas, and the areas that they particularly highlighted were around inclusion. So the statistics, some of the statistics that came out from the survey that they did was that 29% of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander workers agreed that they've had to hide or change who they are at work, compared to 18% of non-Indigenous workers. So those types of statistics are a concern, and this issue of inclusion that we were talking about earlier, it's not just about diversity. You need particularly some of those traditionally marginalised sectors of our society to feel included at work, feel accepted, and to have the trust that they're going to be treated with respect at work. So I think that's a bit of a concern, and some similar statistics came out in respect to disabled people as well. I think that that's an area that we need to do a lot of work in. There's been a lot of work done in women within the workforce, a lot of work done in respect to salary matching, etc. So there has been a lot of work done in that area, and we've seen some success in that area. The Australian Institute of Company Directors reported late last year that for the first time ever, the ASX 200, we had achieved 30% of women on boards. It took a bit longer to get there than it was originally planned, but it's got there. So we now have our biggest companies in Australia, our ASX 200, have 30% board female representation. So we've seen a lot of focus on those areas, which is fantastic. But I think as workforces and employers, we have to focus on some of those more marginalised sectors of our society, particularly around Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders, migrants, disabled people who are recognised as disabled, and focus on those areas as well. The Diversity Council report that was handed down last year made it very clear that workers who work in an organisation that they believe is diverse and inclusive, the levels of employee engagement are often higher as a result of them working in that type of working environment. And the end result of that, and this was actually in the report as well, is the impact on innovation, on labour productivity, because employees are more engaged within their workforce. So there is a direct link, because if you can improve employee engagement, then that will have an impact on loyalty, commitment to the organisation, reduce labour turnover, and will also have an impact from a business perspective in respect to labour productivity, efficiency, and a lot of those types of areas as well. Well, Mapien's worked with a number of companies in this space, and we've seen a variety of different areas that our clients use to try and deal with this issue around diversity. And obviously for a big company with a lot of internal resources, some of the programs that they put in place have the resources behind them. But for those companies who don't necessarily have those internal resources, some of the most successful examples we've seen is where the company has actually talked to the workforce and determined from the workforce what's important in respect to this area of diversity and inclusion. And the reason I raise that is because what you find is what's important for one group of workers will be very different to what's important to another group of workers. Obviously, if you've got a worker in their early 20s, the drivers for what diversity and inclusion means to them are different to someone who's close to retirement, or people with young children, or an Aboriginal employee working within the business. So I think it's really important that you get an understanding for what's important to your own workforce, that you understand the profile of your workforce, and that you talk to them about it, have the conversations with them about it. Some companies that we've worked for have set up diversity and inclusion work groups within their businesses to get that information direct from the employees. So it's not the leaders sitting there making assumptions around what's important. And that allows you then to prioritise, because obviously we could all sit here and have hundreds and hundreds of programs around diversity and inclusion, but that's difficult if you don't have the resources. But if you can start taking one step at a time and looking at the things that are really important for your workforce, then you know that's going to be successful without a doubt. And also there's the positivity around having those conversations and being upfront and open about it and talking about, we want to make our workforce more diverse and inclusive. What do you think we can do to help us in that space? Well, at Mapien we're members of the Diversity Council, and we think that is a really important resource because it demonstrates to us what's important, what's happening within industry. They gather information. So that can often be a good place to start in terms of getting some information about what other companies are doing and what's happening in industry. There's also support networks and networking in a number of different areas and different fields, networking in specific industries, local government, oil and gas. You know, we've had exposure to many of them, for example. And then there's also the government resources. We should never underestimate the resources that are available to help companies become more diverse. particularly in respect to some of those areas that traditionally we haven't seen a large proportion of workers in our industries, Aboriginal, Torres Strait Islander, the areas in respect to disability. So it's about identifying where you can get the support. You know, at Mapien we've worked with a number of companies to help them identify specific targets and specific areas that they might be able to get some support. But it's about having the conversations. There's a lot of work being done in this area, and it's about trying to identify people who might be able to help and looking at it from a network perspective and looking at what other companies are doing as well.